Hey, my name is Drake Travis, and we are back again. We are so happy you've joined us here on the high road. Here's my gorgeous...
Go on.
Fantastic...
Keep going.
beautiful wife, Serena Travis.
You can keep going if you want.
Well, I would, but we're on a time limit. Today, we're meeting Joe Dallas. He founded Genesis Counseling, an organization that helps men with sexual and relational problems.
Next, we'll meet his wife, Renee Dallas. She's sharing about her ministry, WifeBoat, for wives dealing with husbands' sexual issues. I'm ready.
First, it's time to share a few funnies on the lighter side. In this edition of The Lighter Side, here's some actual comments New York City teachers have written on their students' report cards. Yes, these teachers were sent to the principal's office, for real, but here goes. Since my last report, your child has reached rock bottom and has started to dig. Your son is depriving a village somewhere of an idiot. I think that was on my 1975 report card. Another one. This child has been working with glue too much. Oh, how about this one? The gates are down, the lights are flashing, but the train isn't coming. And last, the wheel is turning, but the hamster is definitely dead. Next, police officer comments after a pullover. First one. You know, stoplights don't come any redder than the one you just went through. This one will make you freeze. You take your hands off that car, I will make your birth certificate a worthless document. Or, can you run faster than 1,200 feet per second? Because that's the speed of the bullet that'll be chasing you. People never run from the police, okay? Oh, here's a laugher. You don't know how fast you were going. Well, I guess that means I can write anything I want on the ticket, huh? And last, oh, I'm glad to hear that the chief of police is a friend of yours. So you know someone who can post your bail. Wait, one more. You didn't think we give tickets to pretty women? You're right. Sign here. We don't. A police officer with a sense of humor. Next, we're meeting one of the foremost leaders in the ex-gay movement. He was molested as a young boy, which led to great confusion and an identity crisis. Today, he's sharing about his journey from the brokenness of an 8-year-old boy to the wholeness of a healed man who is married and has children. Birthed out of his life story, he founded Genesis Counseling to help men struggling with sexual addiction recovery and homosexuality. We welcome Joe Dallas.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's good to have you here. You know, Joe, tell us about the journey from being traumatized as a young man to leaving the homosexual life to being a family man.
Well, I wish my story was unusual, but it's not. I'm one of many people who survived early molestation through no fault of my family's, my parents certainly. I was routinely molested by men in my neighborhood, and molestation always generates confusion of some sort. Plenty of homosexual people were never molested, but anyone who is molested will suffer some kind of confusion. That led to severe identity problems and misunderstandings about my own masculinity, which eventually led me into adult homosexuality. But I also was a Christian, and as a Christian, I couldn't, in good conscience, reconcile homosexuality and Christianity. In 1984, I finally reached a crisis point where I realized this is just not what God intended for me. Now, I was studying
Was
to
it,
become a
I hate to
counselor at that
interject,
time.
but what was that moment? I mean, was there a defining moment, or was it just a general
There
journey?
was a defining moment,
Okay.
actually. It came to me very privately when I realized I had been pushing down what I knew to be true about what Scripture said about God's intention for human sexuality. And one night in January of 1984, actually, I had a very defining moment where I realized, you know, I've got to re-examine whether or not I've been kidding myself all these years. There is a popular trend towards kind of rewriting the Bible on this subject. And I had attempted to do that. And I was basing my foundation on that revision of Scripture. And when I finally looked at the issue, I had to admit, I have believed what I wanted to believe rather than what I really believe.
And then
That's what turned me around.
turned being a family man.
Well, yes, within about a year and a half, I met a young woman who has become my wife of 28 years now, mother of my 2 sons. I was studying to become a counselor to do drug and alcohol rehab, but the only door that opened up for me was one that involved counseling people dealing with sexual issues. Now, I did not want to go there because I honestly didn't think there were that many Christian people who had sexual conflicts, and boy, was I wrong.
Oh, wow.
This is one of the most under-addressed issues, I believe, within the modern church, the problem of people who have secret sexual behaviors and desires they don't know how to handle.
What do you say to your critics?
Well,
Do you have critics?
oh, my word. Don't get me started. Yeah, I'm sure I've got critics, but then again, you know, I don't mean to be glib, but what I honestly would say to my critics is, well, I must be about my Father's business. I'm sorry you feel the way you do. You disagree with me, I understand, but here's the bottom line. I believe we have a creator. Our creator has specific intentions for his creation. Those intentions, I believe, are spelled out in the inspired document, the Bible, and whatever falls short of those intentions is the definition of sin. A lot of believers are caught up in sin that they want out of. I'm there for them.
Fantastic. So exactly how do you help these men? I mean, are they coming to you solely for sexual addiction issues, or?
Generally, they come into my office because there's a sexual issue, either homosexuality or addiction to pornography or affairs they've been committing, some form of adultery that they are in crisis over. And so we look at first how to immediately separate themselves from the behavior, then how to establish a structure to be investing in their intimacy with God and proper intimacy with others, then try to get to the bottom line of what has generated this behavior and what are the root issues we need to be looking at.
Well, okay, you said who comes to you for help. How does your organization help these men?
Well, we provide a combination of biblically based counseling, we provide group support, we provide education for them and education for the church at large.
Okay.
That's fantastic.
Wow. Give us a victorious story. Like, well, this guy came and he was on the edge of madness, and now
I'll give you the common victorious story.
Great.
A man comes into our office who is still hanging on to some secret pattern in his life he hasn't been willing to let go of. And we shouldn't underestimate the power of that. He really has come to believe he needs that in his life. He takes the leap of faith to give it up. We start working together to better understand how he can tolerate living life without that. We start walking him through the withdrawal process. We work with him on making amends to his wife or whoever else has been hurt by his behavior. Then we get to getting a better understanding of the dynamics behind the behavior. And he finds out that, lo and behold, no, he's not temptation-free. Yes, he still has internal struggles, but he's no longer under the power of that behavior. And that's the difference I think the Bible teaches between the presence of sin and the power of sin. Nobody is absent the presence of temptation in their lives, but the question is whether or not that has power over us to dictate our behavior.
Wow. It's an amazing verse. I think it's in Romans where it says, you know, our Savior went through every temptation that we go through.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
there's a way out. And you seem to provide that way out. That's really great.
Yes. Also in Romans, Paul said very plainly, sin shall not have dominion over you. That's an important
Love
point.
it.
It doesn't
Wow.
have to rule you.
That's good.
Joe, thank you for sharing
Oh, it's a pleasure.
your journey. It's time for a break. Later on, Joe's wife, Renee, joins us to share more about their story and her ministry, WifeBoat. Dr. Drake, and it's time to cut the nonsense. It's no secret that the media in this country tilts left. What is perplexing is how they still try to pretend they're not biased. In this Cut the Nonsense, I will prove to you that the U.S. media is completely biased and how dangerous this is for our country. Recently, former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani said in a speech that President Obama was unpatriotic. By the reaction in the news, you'd have thought that Giuliani was enemy number one in the USA. But what did the media do back in 2008 when then-candidate Obama called President GW unpatriotic for raising the national debt? Most said nothing, while some journalists applauded the candidate. And meanwhile, President BO has tallied more national debt in 6 years than all 43 former presidents combined in 232 years. So, using President Obama's own words, yes, he's unpatriotic. Speaking of being patriotic, Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu, who in my opinion is among the most patriotic leaders in the world, he came before Congress to talk about how bad this deal was that the Obama administration was making with Iran. It was a powerful speech, and he made the points he needed to make. After the speech, the media wasn't sure how to cover it. Not until the media's commander-in-chief cued them with his criticism. Then they all fell in line like a mama duck leading her chicks. Before day's end, Netanyahu was portrayed as a political hack trying to win a re-election in Israel. Now, by the way, he won the re-election by a landslide. Meanwhile, Iran gets the nuclear bomb they've desired for years. Iran, the country that says over and again how they want to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. Now for ISIS. These butchers are killing Jews, Christians, and other Muslims. And the media won't even touch the stories because Obama says, shh. Remember, Obama called ISIS a JV team that wasn't really a threat. So if the liberal media covered all the atrocities of ISIS, it makes Obama look bad. They can't have that. The BO has already made a mess of the United States of America. Yet the media is just as much to blame for helping this president get through his agenda by not reporting on how bad things have gotten with the economy and national security. So as we move closer to the 2016 presidential election, do yourself a favor and don't let the media pick our next president. You vote with your heart, not with someone else's wallet, and you pick the next president. Let me leave you with this final thought. Do you think the media would have let President G.W. Bush get away with a tenth of the stunts that Obama has gotten away with? I say, cut the nonsense. Report this man's deeds and stop covering for him. Are you sick of the nonsense in our country? Send your ideas to feedback@thehighroadshow.com. On this segment, Joe Dallas' wife, Renee, is joining us. She founded an organization called WifeBoat for women dealing with a husband's sexual issues. She's going to give us a wife's point of view and tell us how she helps women, even those who have given up all hope for their marriage. Welcome, Renee.
Good to be with you.
Yeah. Hey, tell us how you met and married and how you become leaders that help individuals and marriages.
Well, Joe told me, broke the news to me on our second date about his background. So he was wanting to play his cards early, make sure that I was still in, and that was okay with me. I was in no hurry at the time because I had been through a very deep betrayal in my first marriage, and that deeply wounded me. I was in no hurry, but I had gone through such a close relationship with the Lord as a result of the betrayal that I was in no hurry, but I also knew that God was able to work in situations that were really dire, you know, and very sad and full of grief. So after about 3 years, we married, and the irony of the whole thing was that I am a victim of betrayal, and my husband was the person who was deeply involved in sexual sin, and somehow God saw fit to put us together in a ministry where I can minister to the women who've been affected by sexual sin in their marriage, and he can minister to the husbands.
So your familiarity with suffering has really helped you reach others. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I really did think about 3 years into his ministry that I was done with it all. But about 3 years in, I really felt God calling me to really start some support. A funny story is that a wife, called me one day and said, "Hey, what am I, just chopped liver?" They get all the attention and we don't get any help. So that was part of it and what led to it.
So what are some of the challenges that women are facing?
One of the huge challenges that a woman faces when she finds out about her husband's sexual...
I'm sure it works for sons too, but I mean specifically husbands, right?
Yes, exactly. Is really setting boundaries, is a challenge of learning how to set boundaries that don't enable him to continue and for her to keep on getting hurt by that kind of behavior. And that's a huge challenge. She needs a lot of support to develop those kind of boundaries.
Oh, wow, that's really good to know. Yeah.
Are there other factors in a marriage that contribute to these sexual issues?
Well, other factors could be his experience previous and her experience previous to the marriage. Sometimes there's things that come up that weren't undealt with prior to the marriage, and it contributes to it.
What about other things, like some everyday mundane things, like arguing about finance, or just like the fact that there's hardly any communication? Is that a factor?
I think communication can play into it. If they don't feel like they're on the same page about things, it often leads to an attitude of entitlement for the husband or the wife, and they will go act out or do things that are contrary to unity in the marriage, that's for sure.
Okay.
I think Joe can speak to that a lot.
Oh, no
as
question.
well.
I mean, look, there are so often pre-existing problems in a marriage before a man has an affair or before he starts using porn. Now, he can never use that as an excuse and say, oh, well, my wife's a nag, or she's cold, or she picks at me, therefore I'm entitled to go commit adultery. Of course not. But the reality is, if he repents of that sin and they start working together to restore the marriage, both parties have to be willing to look at themselves and say, hey, if this is going to really move ahead, wherever there's wrongdoing on either of our parts, let's be willing to look at it.
Okay, so
Right.
that's really good. Can a wife change her husband, Renee?
Well, probably not.
Oh, you know darn well she can't. You've been trying for 28 years. What do you mean?
That's the one thing. She can change herself first. And I often tell people it's like gears. You've got this set of gears and this set of gears. If she starts changing herself, the shape of her gear changes, and he will react and change with her. And hopefully, as she starts to incorporate healthy things into her own attitude and her own life and her own spirituality, that the shape of his gear will change too, and that relationship will be more intimate, and there will be better communication.
Sounds like humility goes a long way here.
Humility absolutely goes a long way, and it's not okay to wound him because he's wounded you. It's better to look at yourself first and work on yourself.
Okay, does a wife need to change?
Absolutely.
I mean, you've hinted about it, but does a wife need to change?
Absolutely. Many times wives realize once there's a betrayal that she looked past behavior that she shouldn't have. She enabled his behavior in many ways, and maybe she was a little bit too afraid. There's a lot of reasons why she needs to look at herself and maybe change her outlook and really make some intentional choices.
Wow.
Oh, that's great. I love that.
You guys, wow. You're stalwarts in this area. And thank you so much. And Joe and Renee, I mean, your story is an inspiration, and it really drives home the verse, love conquers all.
I'm Melissa Nunnally, and we are back on Global Connections, where we solve the world's problems in 3 minutes or less. Drake and Serena, can you guess what world leader said the following? Many Euro-Atlantic countries have moved away from their roots, including their Christian values. Policies are being pursued that place on the same level a multi-child family and a same-sex partnership, a faith in God and a belief in Satan. This is the path to degradation. Do you know who said this?
Oh, I'd like to think it was our president, but something tells me that it's not.
It was actually Russian President Vladimir Putin. What are your thoughts?
Putin?
Oh, wow, that's kind of surprising because, well, but then again, as of late, it seems like Russia has really been spouting some Christian ethics lately. Maybe not in all their actions, but it's interesting that, you know, we used to pride ourselves on being Christian, but now is it like Russia taking over?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's hard to see evidence of some of this in the cultural war that seems to be, you know, starting, growing, whatever, in Russia. But Russia looks like it's planting its flag on the side of Christianity.
It's interesting. According to Pat Buchanan, the World Council of Families had a list of the 10 best trends of the world, and Russia came out as #1 as a pro-family leader, believe it or not.
I can believe that. The Kremlin has recently posed a ban on homosexual propaganda, abortions, and insulting religious believers.
Well, boy, that happens here all the time, especially in the media. My goodness, look at it. I mean, even recently with Phil Robertson and Duck Dynasty.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it makes you wonder though, because there's obviously some things going on in Russia that they're pushing this moral, absolute kind of agenda, and yet then we see what Putin's doing in Crimea and Ukraine. There's
Yeah,
disconnect.
it's hard to, you know, and we're a long ways away, and does the media tell us the truth about our own towns?
Yeah, are we getting the whole picture?
Are we getting the truth?
Yeah.
So let's not decide what's going on based on what the media wants us to know.
Let's keep finding out.
Yeah.
It does seem interesting that there's this kind of push, though, toward traditional values.
Yeah.
Well, we want to know what you think of Russia's new push toward traditional values. Send us an email at feedback@thehighroadshow.com.
You know, honey, for such tough topics, I really enjoyed our time visiting with Joe and Renee Dallas.
Me too. They were great. And we had some fun in our segments too. But we keep running into the same problem.
What's that?
So much information, so little time.
Well, that's okay. We'll just keep making more shows, more topics, more guests.
More feedback. We'd love to hear more from you. Please drop us an email at feedback@thehighroadshow.com.
Keep tuning in, and we'll see you next time on The High Road.